So my name's Henry, and today I want to cover overwhelm, or more specifically, how you can handle overwhelm in a really simple way, because in the last few days I've gone through some overwhelming moments because I got a new microphone setup, which you're listening to right now. I got the Heil PR40 microphone, and I got a preamp which you plug the microphone into that then goes into my computer. And on top of that, I got a MacBook Pro, so I switched from being a Windows user to a Mac user, and I've never used a Mac in my life. And I made the switch because people were saying good things about the Mac, and I wanted to try things out, and it just felt right. So all of this put together led to me being very overwhelmed, or I had a lot of new stuff to learn. So in this episode, I want to cover what overwhelm really is and why it happens, and then go through 3 simple tips you can use to overcome or get rid of overwhelm. And after that, we'll look at one specific scenario of what you can do if you're on a tight time schedule and just need to get things done and still don't want to feel overwhelmed. And then we'll wrap it up. So I got my Mac, I got my new microphone, and I had a lot of stuff to learn. I had nowhere really to turn to. I had a few friends, but all in all, I needed to solve my problems on my own because I ran into some technical trouble with my Mac, some Wi-Fi things I needed to solve. So I spent a few days figuring things out, and it was overwhelming at times, but I did get through it. And it did give me some perspective on what people go through when they're learning something new, especially when they're learning something where everything is completely different, like building an online business or going after their passion where everything needs to be rearranged. Or something else that is relevant is fatherhood. I became a father in 2011, almost a year ago, and fatherhood or parenting doesn't really come with a manual. Sure, there are a lot of books out there on parenting, but in the end, you have to figure out what works for you and your kids. And it's kind of overwhelming at first, but you get the hang of it. And the more you trust that whatever happens is okay, the easier things go. So let's take a look at what overwhelm actually is and why it happens. So overwhelm happens when we try to figure out everything all at once. Because when you break things down, focus, and stay in the present moment, you can't get overwhelmed. However, it's tough not to feel overwhelmed when you're doing something new. And when that happens, realize that overwhelm isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yes, it may feel, overwhelming, but it's a sign that you're learning something new. The more you're required to learn, the more overwhelmed you're likely to feel. If you just need to learn how to peel a banana, that's pretty easy. But if you suddenly find yourself in a new country without any friends or previous experiences to rely on, that's a bit harder, and you're likely to feel a bit overwhelmed and even a bit scared. And this is what happened to me when I was living in Spain. So I moved to Spain and lived there for almost a year. So my girlfriend and I packed our bags, went to Spain just because it felt good, and we had no friends in Spain, and I had to set up all the usual stuff like bank accounts, and we had to get used to a new way of doing things and a new language. So it was pretty overwhelming, and to be honest, I was somewhat uncomfortable and scared the first few weeks. But after all that passed, we started getting into a routine and things started getting easier. So it's really about being easy on yourself, because in the beginning, everything new will be overwhelming and your brain will struggle to get a handle on it. But if you keep at it and you keep moving forward one step at a time, things will sooner or later fall into place. And when I got my Mac, and as I said, I switched from Windows to Mac, so this was a whole new operating system. The foundation was completely different, and it took my brain a few days to get used to things. And at first I was completely overwhelmed, and I started second guessing my switch, and I even thought about going back to Windows. But I also knew that I was in Overwhelm land, and just taking things one step at a time would make everything much, much easier. And that brings me to our next section, which is how you can handle overwhelm. And I have 3 specific tips or strategies that I use to handle overwhelm. And to be honest, I've been horrible at dealing with overwhelm in the past. My strategy has been to push through the discomfort, and in the past I might have spent 10 hours straight trying to figure out my Mac, but not anymore. And if we go back to Spain, when we moved there, I was horrible at dealing with overwhelm, and I tended to worry a lot. So what I did was that I worried and thought about things that I couldn't do anything about while I was worrying about them. And I was really harsh on myself, and I just wanted things to be perfect right away, but their life is never perfect, and that's something I've come to realize. So I'm much more gentle with myself right now, if that's the right word. I'm okay with things not being perfect and me not knowing everything. So there are 3 main ways that I dealt with overwhelm when I got my Mac and new microphone. So the first one is obvious. It's take a break. Because what happens to me often is that I don't want to take a break when I'm figuring things out. I want resolution, and I want to get it over with so I can relax. But I've realized that even if I get this done, even if I figure out everything on my Mac, life will go on and there will be more things to do. There will be more problems, challenges, and obstacles that I can tackle. So what I did was I did my best, and when I started to feel my brain overloading, I took a break, put the Mac aside for the day, and read a book, did some meditating or just relaxing, and I came back the next day fresh and feeling much, much better, and I was more excited about tackling the issues at hand at that moment. Now the next thing is learn and implement. So what I did with my Mac was I didn't try to learn everything. I just looked at what things I needed to learn in order to get my work done each day, and I learned how to do those things. For example, I write articles, so I need to learn how to use a simple word processor, and I need to learn how to take that and put it into WordPress, which I use for my blog. Now that's a really simple example because it's really easy. But another one would be that I needed to set up my microphone, this microphone, and I needed to get things working on my Mac because the microphone is connected to a preamp or a mixer which needed drivers. So it needed software to function on my Mac. So I needed to get that done and handled. So I just took things one step at a time. I didn't try to learn everything all at once because that would have completely destroyed me. This is really something I see a lot of people do when they're trying to build a lifestyle business around their passion. What people do is they try to learn everything there is about internet business before they start, when in fact all you have to do is learn the first step and then take that step. For example, if you're just getting started, you need to find the intersection between what you love to do, what you're good at, and what people are willing to pay for. Then you need to register a domain name and get a website up. Those are the first steps you need to take. And you don't need to learn anything other than that in the beginning. You don't have to worry about writing articles or producing a podcast or creating products or building an email list or any of those things. It comes down to learning one thing and then implementing and then learning the next thing. Because this is what I did in the beginning, or I should say in the middle, because in the beginning I spent 2 or 3 years just banging my head against the wall and trying to learn everything. So after I became determined to focus, what I did was I learned one thing at a time. So I wanted to start a blog. I came up with a name and I came up with a topic which was just general personal development at the time, and I just started. And what I discovered was that I didn't have to know everything. I just had to follow my excitement and do what I enjoyed. Then after a while I started getting readers and my subscribers started reaching the thousands. And that's when I started getting feedback from people on what they wanted to hear from me. And by writing more and producing more content, I also realized what I wanted to produce and share with people. So by taking action, things become much, much clearer and easier. Because when you try to figure things out, you will feel overwhelmed, and you don't have to. And the third tip I have, which is really my favorite, and it's to stay completely present right here, right now. And I talked about this in depth in the last podcast episode. That's episode number 3. If you want to look that up, you can go to wakeupcloud.com/3. That's just the number 3. Now, being present just means that you're here in this moment. Because it's impossible to be overwhelmed if you stay in just this moment. Don't go into past or future, and don't try to figure things out. For example, while I was figuring out how to use this microphone, I just stayed completely present with my body, and I felt myself breathing in and out. And I noticed my fingers. Left hand was on the keyboard and the right hand was on the mouse. And I just focused on what I was doing at the time. And it completely eliminated the overwhelm, because I can only produce overwhelm if I start thinking about everything I don't know and how horrible things are and all of that. It's fascinating to observe these things within yourself, because we produce overwhelm, we produce fear, and we produce really every negative emotion that comes up. Now, I don't mean that you produce it consciously, because we don't really control our thoughts or what pops up. But there's always a pattern to how you've been conditioned to react to things. And once you become aware of those patterns and how you react, they kind of start falling away after a while. Now, they may still function for a while, kind of like if you're on a swing going back and forth, and then you jump off the swing, it may still go back and forth for a while until it comes to a stop. So those are the 3 things I did to handle overwhelm. So I took a break, I learned one thing at a time, and I took action, and I stayed completely present right here, right now, or I did my best to stay in the present moment. So stay aware of how you react to overwhelm and notice your standard patterns. Then break them. Now, something you may be wondering is, what if I need to get things done right now and I don't have time to take breaks? So if you're on a tight deadline, then next time make sure you have more time to learn things and get it done. But in this case, all you can do really is to be completely present. Don't think about what might happen or what you should do. Simply be here, breathe, and do what you have to do one step at a time and one moment at a time. And yes, still take mini breaks whenever possible, because even if you're on a tight schedule, you can still take 5 to 10 minute breaks, and you can use those breaks to do nothing. So just relax on your bed or on your sofa, or have a cup of tea, or whatever you like doing. Just relax and try not to worry too much. Just be in the moment and be with whatever you're doing. Because you have to avoid falling into the disaster scenario thinking in these cases. Because sometimes when I get overwhelmed, I start thinking about, okay, so I don't know what to do on my Mac, and that's going to mean that I can't get my work done. And after a while, I'm thinking about how I'm going to be on the street pushing a shopping cart, and then I'm going to die homeless. So you have to be aware of how your thinking morphs from just being overwhelmed or not knowing how to do one thing into, okay, I'm going to die homeless. Because sometimes when you get into a negative pattern, it can end with something like that unless you're present and really aware of what's going on. Because you have to remember that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And I say behind, but really the awareness is everywhere. So that brings us to the end of this podcast episode. And the bottom line here is that overwhelm is not really created by external circumstances. It's created by us in our head. So overwhelm is created by how we react to external circumstances. And whenever overwhelm happens, it's a blessing in disguise, because it means that on some level, learning is happening and you're getting better. Most people give up and the learning stops, but if you keep showing up and keep moving forward, breakthroughs will happen. This is especially true when you're building a lifestyle business around your passion, because if you're just starting out, you may spend a lot of time in overwhelm land, but slowly you'll get the hang of things. And as the months pass, you'll start to master aspects of running your business. And this is why this takes time. But this is also why anyone can get paid to do what they love if they are determined enough to keep going when the going gets tough. There are a lot of moving parts to following your passion and building a business around something you enjoy. In the end, you have to learn all those moving parts, and you can't learn them all at once. And you can't learn them by just listening to podcasts or reading articles or taking courses. You have to learn them by a mix of taking in information and learning the proper strategy, and then implementing what you've learned and discovering what works for you and what doesn't. So that's all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you're overwhelmed, remember to try out one or several of the tips I gave you. And those were: number 1, take a break; number 2, learn and implement; and number 3, stay completely present right here, right now. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more goodies, and if you want to learn more about how you can turn your passion into a thriving lifestyle business, come visit me at wakeupcloud.com and say hi. I'll see you in the next episode. This is Henry, signing out.